Hello everyone, thank you for taking the time to watch this presentation. What this presentation is about is the program analysis portion of the Facility Needs Assessment Report for the Monadnock Regional School District Elementary Schools. This, together with the Building Needs Assessment presentation, form the Facility Needs Assessment Report, which is used to generate and compare future options. Here we will review the process by which the student capacity of each school is calculated and then generate space needs. This will give us a clear understanding of the needs, size, and scope of proposed projects. With that, let me get started. To start with, I would like to take a large-scale view of the region's demographics. What you see is a chart that is a population pyramid. It graphs the number of people in each age level from 0 to 85 in 5-year increments. What you can see is that there are two distinct bulges, the top one being the baby boom generation, and 30 years later, one being the millennials, their children. In between those two groups, we have a dip that is sometimes referred to the X generation. We can see that it is significantly smaller than the baby boomers or the millennials. 30 years later, their children are also a small group, and they are between 0 and 10. If we compare the New Hampshire pyramid to the nationwide pyramid, we can see that they are very similar in that we can see the baby boomers and the millennials. But what is different is that the baby boom generation in New Hampshire is larger and the 0 to 10-year-olds are much smaller. What this tells us is New Hampshire is aging and that the younger generations are not staying in New Hampshire and not having as many kids. To highlight this, New Hampshire ranks as one of the highest in the nation of percentage of people over 65. What this tells us is that we will likely see an increase in the birth rates when millennials start to have children of their own, and therefore school-age children a few years later, but that those numbers will be smaller than past generations. Long term, this could flatten out to close to the current levels. The first step in the programming phase of the study is the enrollment projections. This will give us an idea of what to expect the peak number of students will be, but also gives us valuable information on the number of students per grade and trends in migration. We start with assembling the historic enrollments and study changes over time to see how many students matriculated from one grade to the next. The next chart is called the cohort survival ratios. We take the number of students for each grade for each year and compare that to the prior grade for the prior year. What this shows us is how many students stayed in the district or if there was movement in or out. What we see is that migration in the district is relatively flat, with most years less than 2% change overall. This is indicative of the district's rural character, with few people moving each year. However, there is a trend that shows a dramatic loss on average of 6 to 7% between grades 3 and 4 for the last 6 years. This might be an indication of another choice parents have that is made available at the 4th grade level. Next, we average those ratios over a number of years. We do that in 3 separate ways. First, we take the average over the last 5 years. This is usually very stable because it smooths any single year aberration. Second, we use the last 3 years and count the most recent most favorably and the most distant the least favorably. Lastly, we do a simple projection which explores what would happen if the factors causing migration were eliminated and all students just stayed in place. The critical factor in this is the birth rates, because our projections are only as good as the data is. Birth rates are difficult to predict, so any predictions out beyond 5 years is based on estimated birth rates. Knowing what we know about demographics in the state, we can assume that births might slightly increase and then stabilize. To create the projections, we multiply the current enrollments with the cohort survival averages and then do the same for subsequent years for as many years out as we have birth data for. We stop at 7 years because this is the last year we have real data for births. After that, every year is based only on estimates for births and therefore is much less accurate. The chart for the 5-year and 3-year weighted projections show very similar figures, a slow decline over 7 years. The decline is largely due to declining birth rates. As stated earlier, the decline in birth rates is caused by generational differences and likely to change. The simple projection is slightly higher, reflecting the fact that if migration out of the district were interrupted, that enrollments would increase simply by keeping students. The recommendation is to design for a slightly higher figure than is currently enrolled and to design in the ability to expand in the future. Although the projections show a decline, there are factors that could reverse that. Birth rates may increase as millennials begin to have more children. There are already housing projects that are planned in some communities which could attract families. Lastly, families often choose where to live based on the quality of the school district. If the current facilities were improved, this might cause migration into the district. Now that we have the design capacity established, we can calculate the optimum number of teaching stations required. To do this, we look at the average and maximum class sizes to make sure we have enough teaching stations for the anticipated number of students without overbuilding. We then look at the core facilities using the maximum capacity for the classrooms. The reason for the higher number is to make sure that the core can handle any peak year that comes through. We need to make certain assumptions to complete the calculations. Special education is one of the more difficult areas to plan because the number of students and the style of education can vary greatly over time. With a design capacity, core capacity, and required number of stations, we can calculate the space needs for the school. The size of each room is determined by state Department of Education guidelines, national standards, and experience. Some spaces have prescriptive sizes and others are simply an amount of square feet per student. The educational spaces are generally prescribed size of the room multiplied by the number of required stations. The core facilities are mostly a factor of the necessary square feet per student. We then get a total for the program areas and apply a net to gross ratio. This calculates the space such as corridors, mechanical rooms, and storage room, among others. This gives us a total for what a new design might look like. The new is then compared to the existing to see where deficiencies lie. This is done for each school, and the same method is followed for each school in each future option. As we look at current capacity and configuration, we can assess how well the existing schools meet the desired educational program spaces. Cutler is close to the desired size and gross square footage, but the layout of the building reduces its efficiency. The classrooms vary in size quite a bit, with most close to the desired 900 square feet, but some as small as 650 square feet. Core areas such as art and music are small. Emerson is very close to the desired program in size, with a couple of deviations. Classrooms are slightly smaller than the desired 900 square feet, with an average of 880 square feet. This is generally not a problem as long as the number of students per classroom is limited. Some corridors have rooms only on one side, meaning that Emerson has a higher percentage of space dedicated to corridors than typical schools. The library is also slightly small, but more importantly, it is one of the few spaces on a different level than the rest of the school. The library is often a hub of activity for schools and therefore should be more centrally located on the main level. Gilsum is more difficult to analyze the program because of how low the student population is. With the low number of students per grade, multi-age classrooms are used to have more efficient use of space. The classrooms are larger than normal, but this is necessary when two grades share the same room. Rooms such as the gymnasium are one size no matter how many students there are in the school, so Gilsum has a much higher percentage of space dedicated to core facilities than you would normally find. In fact, Gilsum already exceeds the state cap of 120 square feet per student. This may eliminate the possibility of receiving state aid for the building. Mount Caesar has had recent additions and renovations, but deficiencies in the program do exist. Classrooms vary in size, with kindergartens from 1,023 square feet per room down to 633 square feet, which is far below the state recommended 1,000 square feet. The largest omission is the lack of a separate gymnasium. The cafeteria is much too small for physical education, and sharing a space between the two uses creates scheduling conflicts. Troy, being the oldest school in the district, has the largest challenges for the program. Most rooms are small for the use. The average classroom size is only around 680 square feet. However, the state rules allow small rooms if the number of students is limited. In conclusion, there are a few facts that we can clearly state. Enrollments are likely to stay at or below the current levels near term. This may not stay this way because of planned developments that could bring in new families, and because changing demographics may increase the birth rates. Every school in the district has had multiple additions, and with each addition, the building layouts have become increasingly sprawling. Many spaces such as special education have been co-opted from different uses and no longer function as intended. Lastly, all the elementary schools have some educational program deficiencies, with some more significant than others. Even Mount Caesar, which is considered to be in the best condition of the district, is still missing one of the largest teaching areas, a gymnasium. This concludes the educational program analysis portion of the Monadnock Regional School District Elementary Schools Facility Needs Assessment Report. Thank you for listening.